You know, we have been in the midst of transition for quite a while. In fact, I think it's been a year. And we have navigated that transition in different ways. And one of the ways that we've done that is since January, there's been a team of 5 people that have committed to teaching and equipping on a Sunday morning. And along the way, we get to have the opportunity to have special speakers also come and speak. And this morning, I just think of, the reason I even started out with transition is Mike Krogh is coming to speak to you this morning. And if you don't know Mike has been here forever. So he has been here through the thick and through the thin, and he has stayed committed. And if you don't know who Mike is, you need to get to know him because he's a pretty awesome guy. But we have the privilege this morning of being able to hear from him. He is elder, I'm not calling you old, but in the sense that he is wise. He is seasoned. And he gets to bring us the Word of God this morning. So please help me welcome Mike.
You ever notice everybody brings water up with them? It's for the dry mouth. But thank you for all coming. I'm going to do things just a hair different. I'm going to go into the Old Testament today. But I'd also like to say thank you to all the people out in TV land that are watching. I always want to say that. But yeah, so today we're going to do things a hair different. I'm going to talk a little about the Old Testament, then I'm going to swing it back into the New Testament. But if you see me drop this down so you can't hear me, if it goes, go on. Yeah, do that, because I will do that, trust me. But yeah, so we're going to have a good time. I'm just going to try to show you how awesome God really is. The story I'm going to tell you is crazy. This gentleman just went wrong. But he was supposed to be one of the greatest men of Israel ever. So let's just start here a little bit first. Let's start with Judges 13, 1 through 7. He realized the evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. I think God's just trying to teach him a lesson. It takes 40 years for them to get wise. I really do. A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of Danites had a wife who was sterile and remained childless. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are sterile and childless, but you are going to conceive and have a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything clean, because you will conceive and give birth to a son. No razor may ever be used in his head, because the boy is to be a Nazarite, set apart for God from birth, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of Philistines." It's a little crazy when you think about it. Why does the angel say, don't drink any wine? But we all know that, right? The last thing you want to do is have a child when you've been drinking. That's just not too smart. But the food part, back in the day, God set before them an order that was, don't eat any pigs, horses, no shelled fish. Any fish that doesn't have scales, you can't eat that either. And I thought about that. It's got to be because God was trying to keep their bodies as pure as possible, to keep them strong. So he just gave them these little orders. Let's turn, we're not going to turn it, just put it up here, Leviticus 11, 1 through 46. And the reason I'm putting it up there, I'm not going to read it because you guys will be here till Tuesday. But that whole chapter talks about the food that they can and cannot eat. So if you want to get a good idea of the rules that God set before them, read that because it's good. And it's when God gives you orders, it's so important to follow them, even though it sounds like it's like I don't get this thing, but it's all right. But after a while, the Samson started to grow a little bit. Things started to change. Oh, a Nazirite? I was going to tell you that too. A Nazirite is a person that is set aside especially for the work of God. When he was born, his job was to follow what God wanted him to follow. And we're going to find out he didn't do such a good job of that. Okay, so let Judges 13:24. Boy, I'm losing myself here. The woman gave birth to a boy and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mohanah Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. So now, as a young child, God's already starting to work in his life. He's starting to tell him where he's going to go, what he's going to do, how he's going to do it, and the way he wants it done. But for some reason, as Samson started to grow up, he kind of like most of us, I think we've probably all kind of done this thing. He just began wanting to be Samson himself. He wanted to do his thing. So why God let him move out that direction, I don't know. But hey, God gave us free will, right? He gave us free will. And he said, well, this is what I want, but I'm going to be free will. If you want to go do this, go ahead and do it. But remember, there's consequences for it. And could you imagine God not being that way? Could you imagine God being a dictator? Where, they think Soviet Union's got it bad. If you got somebody like God that knows everything, knows where you're going, what you're doing, you couldn't do anything. You'd be stuck. But he is not. He just gives us free will. So Samson, as he starts growing up, go to Judges 14:1-4. Now this is beginning of Samson. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her. Now this part I get. Now get her for me as my wife. What is going on here? He's put a set aside for God's work. And now he's telling his dad and mom what to do? How can he do that? He's a special man. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines and get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. And this is just a little bit of my take. Samson going a little off as young. I understand. I was young one time too, and I did some pretty dumb things. But you got Samson doing this and going against his father and mother. But God still uses it to get some of the job done. So parents don't want him to get married, but verse 4. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For at that time they were ruling over Israel. So we've talked many times about God taking the bad and using it for good. Samson's completely doing it wrong, but God said, okay, if that's the way you're going to do it, Samson, then I guess I'm going to change and I'm going to do it this way. So he let him get married to this woman because he figured if he didn't, God wouldn't have the chance to fight against the Philistines, because Samson was really, in reality, going into the Philistine place. Oh, put it up, okay. Thank you. Yeah, so he was actually joining the Philistines when he's going to marry this woman. So what biggest thing that God worried about with that is he did not want the Israelites to intermarry. He did not want them to leave the Israelite nation. They want the men to marry the women to marry the men. And the reason that was is because if you go through the Bible, every time that Israel did that, this is what happened. They ended up, all of a sudden the Philistines have got them. Then this group's ruling over them. Then the Romans are ruling over them. It's just, that's why God tried to stop it. And if you find the Bible, it didn't work very well at all. But if you look at Deuteronomy 7, 3 and 4, that talks about that. That talks about them God not wanting to intermarry, because it just wouldn't work out. And we find that all the time, every place we do. So later on during this story, Samson is finally convinced his parents that he can get married. It's okay. So they're going on. This is where the story gets a little bit crazy. But they were going down to get to his wife so he could get married. On the way down, him and his mother and father are going along, and all of a sudden a young lion comes and jumps out at Samson. So what does Samson do? Tears it apart, kills it. No big deal. Is it? So he continues on his way, and they fit then do that stuff. And then later on, Samson's coming along again, and I'm going to read this one. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to. Verse 8 through 9. Sometime later, when he went to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. In it was a swarm of bees and some honey, which he scooped out with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. I don't think I'd have put my hand in there and took the honey out. But Samson is so involved in everything that's in his life. He's not paying any attention to anybody else's life. He's not paying attention to his parents, and he's getting married. It's all great. But after he gets together with all the men that are going to be part of the party, because they used a lot of men. During his, I believe it's 80 men were part of his wedding party. So when he's doing this, talking to the men and stuff like that, and Samson had a good way of goading the Philistines. I don't know why he did it, but anything that he could do to get them worked up, upset, he did it. So he's talking to these guys and says, hey, I'm going to give you a riddle. So he gives them this riddle, and let's see. Out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet. Anybody get that? So anyway, he did that, and then what he told them, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you that riddle, and then the 7 days of the marriage ritual, if you can give me the answer before that, I will give you 30 pieces of clothing and 30 pieces of garment. And so, of course, the Philistines are going to take him on. So they're trying to figure it out, and they can't do it. Well, now he's married to the Philistine woman, And now the other Philistine guys are prodding her. Come on, we need to answer this riddle. We want to show Samson up. So they go, they try it, then they're coaxing his wife. Come on, you've got to help us do this. So she's trying to do it, and this is a lesson Samson should have learned really quick. Because then Samson's wife, let's see. Samson's wife got so upset because she wouldn't help him. She started really pushing herself on him. So Judges 14:19, oh no, 14:16 and 17, I'm sorry. And Samson's wife threw herself on him sobbing. You hate me, you don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even explained it to my father and mother, he replied, so why should I explain it to you? So Samson is listening to his wife sob and cry, which I know I'm a guy, if my wife starts crying, I'm going to pay a lot of attention. And I'll be honest. Because that's, after 54 years, I'd probably start crying. But she kept it up until finally one day he gets this riddle, and he gives her the answer, so she gives it to the Philistines. So they solve it. So he asked what's going on. So he answered him. This is, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? That's the answer. And then Samson really gets upset. Really gets upset. So he takes, this part, Samson made a bet. He should pay up the bet, right? You know how he pays up the bet? Anybody know how he pays it up? He goes out and kills 30 Philistines. Yeah, that's how he pays his bet. He goes out and kills 30 people. And I was wondering, did God really want him to do that? But I know God was trying to get back at him, and maybe that's one of the ways God did. God does things much different than I do, because he's a lot smarter than I am. And then Samson really gets mad. And Samson's father comes back, takes his wife, and gives his wife away. How'd you like that? Have your dad take your wife and say, hey, I'm giving you some other guy. So he went and gave him to one of the 80 men that was at the party, part of his wedding thing. And of course, what happens? Now Samson gets even madder. So what he does is he takes, I think it was 300 fox. He ties their tails together, 2 by 2. He puts a torch on their tails, sends them out into the grain fields and starts all the Philistines' grain on fire. Wise decision? I think Samson should have been thinking a hair bit more about what the revenge was going to be on him. Because if you're going to start trouble and get in a fight, sooner or later you're going to get paid back, right? You are going to get it sooner or later. Well, the really sad part about it is the Philistines asked who did it, and they told them it was Samson. So what do the Philistines do? They take his wife and her father and burn them to death. You see how this thing is working? They do this, they do that, and it just goes from here to here to here, and it keeps escalating. So finally it gets to the point where they're nothing but fighting and back and forth. And then Samson finally gets really upset again, and then he gets into another fight with him. Then he takes a donkey's jawbone, goes out, and kills 1,000 Philistines. And then he's got to brag a little bit. Hey, look at this. I took this donkey's jawbone and I killed 1,000 Philistines. It doesn't say that way in the Bible. That's my interpretation. So he goes and kills 1,000 men, which this one I do understand. If somebody had killed my wife, yeah. Yep. But then another thing I said, after he gets done, he's walking along, and then he's just going, oh man, I'm thirsty. And then he's going along and he goes, God, you have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? Then God opened up the hollow place in Leah, and water came out of it. How can he talk to God like that? He just gave him this great victory. Everything is going his way, and then the first thing he does is say, hey, God, you want me to die of thirst? Give me some water. Come on. He could have just went, hey, God, I'm thirsty. Could I have a drink of water? And I'm sure he'd have gave him water, whatever he wanted. But Samson doesn't stop there. Now, he doesn't have a wife. So, Judges 16, 1 and 2. I read this, I don't know how many times, and this floors me. One day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told Samson is here. Anybody get this? This man of God, or supposedly, has now broken so many of the laws that God set before him. It's crazy. But he did it. He went and slept with a prostitute. Of course, then the Philistines try to capture him there, but it doesn't work. He just rips the gates off the city wall and carries him off and throws him someplace. But then Samson even continues more. If you wonder, this is going to go someplace after a while. This is a lot about Samson. But Samson even does a little bit more. He sees this lovely woman. Judges 16, 6 through 9. So he meets Delilah, beautiful, another Philistine woman. So he starts staying with her. And of course, the Philistines now want to find out what's going on in his life. How come he's so powerful? How come we can't touch him? Why can't we do anything to him? So Delilah, and they offer her, all the leaders that come to talk to her, offer us, I can't remember, 1,100 shekels of silver. Each one of them. So if there was 2 or 3 or 4, she gets 1,100 from each one. So I think that might make me want to talk to a little bit, but so then she starts doing the same thing his wife did. The same thing. Don't you think Samson would get this little bit of intelligence saying, no, I'm not going through this again? But he doesn't. He just keeps on going. And it just keeps talking to her. And finally, just like the first one, he tells her. So they go through this whole thing. You got to read your book of Judges, because if you haven't, you've got to read it. Because there's so much to this story that I couldn't talk about because it'd take forever. But finally, he does tell Delilah the answer. And then she tells the Philistines. So Samson is He's in trouble. But let's go to verse 20. I'm just going to read it. I don't even know. Yeah, I did. 16, 20, and 21. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They set him to grinding. How do you think Samson feels now? Everything that God had told him, he didn't listen. Samson, just like us, wanted to live his own life. He wanted to be Samson. He wanted to be recognized. Instead of doing like, I couldn't imagine if Samson would have followed what God's orders were, how much more would that guy have done? I mean, talking about taking care of the Philistines, I think that it'd have been much, much different. But I'm going to change the story back just a little bit. I'm going to go to the New Testament now. And I'm going to talk to you about, this is one we've talked about many times. It's Luke 15, 11 through 24. But I'm just going to do it a little different because I want to have some fun with it. This is the prodigal son story. You ever wonder conversation went on between those guys? I'm going to tell you. Hey, Dad. Yeah, son, what you want? Hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Oh, absolutely. What you got? Well, Dad, I've been working really hard for you for all these years, and I've been busting my butt. And anything you wanted, I've done for you. And, I'd like to go out and take a vacation. Oh, you want to take that? That's okay. Yeah, you could take a vacation. What do you want, a couple of weeks? Well, Dad, it's a little bigger than that. Oh, it is? Yep. Would you mind giving me my inheritance? What? I'm not dead yet. Yeah, Dad, but if I'm going to have a good time, I need the money so I can have a good time. So finally, the father gives in, and he gives the kid the inheritance, right? The one thing is, if you read this, I'm going to just read this one little piece of it. As soon as I flip this open. Okay, and to this part of end of verse 11. So he divided his property between them. You notice it says them? That means the other brother got his portion too. Not just the prodigal. The other son did too. But you notice the difference? The one son didn't go anyplace. He's still stuck with his dad. So the younger son took off doing his thing, and you kind of figure, what is this kid doing? But you notice his dad could have done almost anything. He was probably quite wealthy. And he could have went, hey, Gary, my son's taken off. You want to do me a favor, just kind of follow him, make sure he's okay? I don't want anything to happen to him. But Dad didn't do that. His son decided, so he took off. He was on his own, had no help from his father, nor anybody else, and often wondered, did friends go along with him too? Because he's got all this money now. So he goes out and he starts spending money. You see a lot of warning signs in what's going on with these guys. Number one, both of them dished their dad. Samson did much more. Prodigal son just took his money and left, where he really should have stayed with his dad and helped out until the time was up. But he didn't. But as the story goes on, we find out that the kid starts spending all his money. And finally, he's next to nothing. So don't you think there would be a few warning signs here? Wouldn't you think Samson and the prodigal would both get a little bit wiser? Cake's off. He's running out of money. He's still got some left. So you think, well, maybe I'm running out. Maybe I think I'm going to go home. I'll have to apologize to my dad, but it's okay. But he doesn't. His friends start leaving. So finally, it's to the point where everybody's gone, and he's all by himself. Finally, he runs out of money, has to find a job, ends up feeding pigs, eating the food of the pigs because he had nothing. And then finally, he gets wise. But the crazy thing is, he could have just went back to his dad and said, hey, I was an idiot, I'm sorry. But he didn't. He's going to, okay, how can I do this? I'm going to tell my dad that I'm not your son anymore. I'm sorry for what I did. Just make me one of your workers, and I'll be okay. But when the prodigal does get home, as we know, his father just took off after him when he saw him. Took him back in, didn't care. The only thing he probably told him was, go take a bath. That's because I think about it, he had to stink. So and this story is so great because that's kind of what God is. That is God. We've done crazy things. There ain't anybody in here that hasn't. But when you go to him with honesty and an open heart, he'll forgive you right away. I mean, it's just done. But why is it that Samson and him didn't pay attention to all the things that God was trying to tell him about? Hey, don't do this because of that. Don't do that because of this. But they didn't listen to him. We all get, when we do things that God doesn't want, we all get warnings. We don't always see them, but they're there. And sometimes it's somebody else telling you something. But I wasn't going to, but I'm going to tell you a story. This is about me when I was younger. I was, Autumn told you, I've been here all my life. This is my church home, and the only way I go out is in a box. I was hanging around with some of my friends, goofing off, and we were going, hey, Mike, we're going to head to a party tonight. You want to go with me? Or go with us? Well, of course, I'd have my own car. And I said, yeah, why not? I'll do it, yeah. So I got in my car that night and went over to the party, and I walk in the door. First thing I do is go grab a beer. So I'm sitting and drinking a beer, talking to my friends, having a good time. And I was a music lover when I was a kid. I love music. I still do. So I was sitting talking. All of a sudden, they started lighting up drugs, marijuana. And then one of my friends said, hey, Mike, you want some? And I went, nah, not right now. And I was thinking, well, maybe, it's not a big deal. And this is the warning God gave me. I kid you not. Mama told me not to come. It's not to have fun, son. It's not the way to have fun. I had heard that song on the way to the party. That thing jumped into my mind like you wouldn't believe. And I talked to my friends. I finished my beer. I had to do that anyway. I was young. And I talked to my friends, and I said, I got to go. I can't do this. And so I left. And I still have those same friends to this day. We never, ever broke up because of that. But there was one thing that was really great about it. When I went to parties after that, they're the ones that would told him he doesn't do that. I didn't have to do it anymore. They did it. So that's a story that saved my life. Because if you know me, I was pretty crazy. And I'm willing to bet if that song would not have popped into my head, that night I probably would have done it. But I kid you not, I have never in my life touched a drug. Never. Thanks to that song. So let's go talk about Samson a little bit more, because he's got his eyes gouged out. So Samson now is he's in trouble. Everything that God wanted him to do, he can no longer do. The Philistines lead him around with a rope, whatever. I'm not saying that's what they did, because it doesn't say in there. But wherever they took him, he had no choice but to go, because he couldn't do anything about it. So I wonder what Samson was like when he was grinding wheat. Was he just sitting there complaining because his eyes were gouged out, or was he saying, God, I'm sorry, I was an idiot? I think that's more what Samson was doing, because he finally realized what he had done is all the things that God wanted to do, he ended them. He stopped the great work of God because he had to be himself. But then it literally gets a little bit crazier, because the Philistines decide they are going to have a little fun with Samson. So the rulers of the Philistines decide to have some fun. So they brought Samson out and decided to use him for entertainment. So they made him dance, do whatever, and that. And then finally, they just mocked Samson to the end. But when you think of everything that Samson done, and now he's at this point, what happened here? We do a lot of crazy things, and I was one of them. Why is it that, because Samson had so many warnings here, why is it that we take and ask God for forgiveness? Because we do it, and then we ask God, please help me out of this mess. So he helps you out. And then 2 days later, we jump into the same pot. And then we do it again. See, God is always going to forgive us, but the problem is what happened to Samson. If we keep jumping into that all the time, asking forgiveness, and then jumping back in, asking forgiveness, jumping back in, sooner or later it catches up just like it did to Samson. His life was going quite well until he decided it was all about himself. And then God finally went, Samson, I do love you, but you keep doing this, something's going to go wrong. And that's what happened. And that's what will happen to us. We can ask forgiveness 1,000 times, and we'll always be forgiven. But the consequences that come with it, like with Samson there, those are going to come our way. God is kind and gentle and merciful, but there's a point in time where things just are going to happen. And this just kind of popped into my head, so I'm going to do it anyway. One of the best things I like about something here in our church is the other 6 days. I mean, if all the rest of it went away, that one would not go away. Because those 6 days are so important to us and to people out there. Just imagine if these two guys would have had somebody like that. I'm going to throw the prodigal out there first. So the prodigal is doing his thing, telling his dad what he wants the money. And let's just call his Uncle Bob. Comes walking up to him and says, hey, man, what are you doing? Well, Uncle Bob, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a party and I'm going to have some fun. That's not the way you do it. You do not order your dad around and tell him you want this or you want that. Come on, kid, wake up. Smell the coffee. Could it have changed? Could the kid went, you're no, uncle, you're right. And he just tells daddy sorry, and it's a done thing. Samson's the same thing. He's out there just doing it all. And you ever wonder how many friends Samson had? This just popped in my head. Imagine that. Imagine you're a friend of Samson. Could you have some fun with that? Because I'm going to show some of my side again. Because I'm one of those guys, I went out to the Philistines and went, poof, come on, you want me? Want a piece of me? And then as soon as they came after me, I'd run behind Samson. That's just me. But it could have been the same with Samson. If his friends would have said, Samson, come on, don't treat your parents like that. Don't do this, don't do that. It's just not right. But nobody came aboard. See, that's why the other 6 days, come on, guys, get on board. Sometimes you don't even have to say a word. Sometimes it's only a hug. But yep, so Samson ends up doing, boy, I got off track, didn't I? But Samson, anyway, he took and finally did his dance, and then they tied him in between the pillars. And the Philistines, being intelligent people that they are, didn't notice that Samson's hair was growing back. But I'm going to be dead honest with you. Samson could have been bald. His hair was the symbol of his strength because God wanted him to be that perfect person. So even at this point, he could have been bald for this one. So he's a... I lost my page. Doesn't take me long to lose place sometimes. So they had him dance and stuff like that, and then finally they took him up and put him between the two pillars of the building. I don't know if it was exactly what it was. So they put him in between buildings, and then they tied him to it, and he put his hands against them, and Samson's sitting there, and then he's going, because Samson realized that in reality, for God's helping God, he was done. He had destroyed himself because of his lust for women. Period. I'm just going to put it out there. That's what it was. Lust for women. Then let's go. I'm going to read this whole part. Then we'll get out of here. Judges 16:25 through 30. While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson. I want you to notice that on the roof, there's 3,000. It doesn't say how many are in the whole place. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "O sovereign Lord, remember me. O God, please strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistine for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached down toward the 2 center pillars and with the temple stood, bracing himself against them, right hand on one and left on the other. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." So he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than alive. And just one little piece of the next thing there. It says, "Then his brothers and his father." I thought about this this morning when I was kind of looking at it. She was fertile, and now she's got more sons. So God didn't just bless her with Samson. God is good. So But that's the story of Samson. You know, I couldn't imagine how Samson felt, and I know why he wanted to die. But that's how merciful God is. Because just imagine if God would have told Samson no. If God would have said, no, Samson, I'm sorry. What you did to yourself. And now you've got to live with it. But God cared enough about him, even through all the junk, all the garbage. He was going to let him perish along with the Philistines. But that's how good God is. We do things wrong. We do things we know we're not supposed to do, but we do them. But God doesn't like it. He's not okay with it, but he's willing to forgive it. So in the next 6 days, let people know that. Let them know your story. I've got a lot more stories than one I just told. I've got some really good ones. But so I'm going to close in prayer, but thank you for coming. This was fun. It was awesome. And I love you guys in this church. So thank you. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this opportunity. Father, you are so awesome. Father, I thank you that you just continue to bless us and watch over us, Father. And I know that your hand is always out to touch and reach us when something is going wrong. And I ask that you just continue to do that in our lives, Father. And I ask that you bless us this week, be with us in all that we do, and may we touch another person's life. I just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.